Welcome to Betting Weekly Extra Time European Edition. This year, it is winner stays on. Only the most profitable handicapper on the week will be invited back for the following show. And the season started in spectacular fashion with some serious profits for viewers and listeners. And there was always going to be some regression. And last week, I think we got it when a draw no bet play was enough to win the challenge. And we have got a new champion in the shape of Will White, professional bettor who downed French football expert James Easton. The aim of the handicappers is the same. Stay on, get paid, make some money for everybody. If they lose the challenge, they go to the back of the queue. Our handicappers only get paid if they are on the show. The mortgage is in jeopardy. You are with myself, Dan Roebuck, while senior handicapper Steve Wyss is also with me to give us his picks and assess the two tipsters' selections who'll go head-to-head. Steve, it was a bit of a dour battle between Will and James last week, we have to admit.
Good day to you, gentlemen. How are you doing? Yes, I suppose it was the soccer equivalent of a 1-0 win, a scrappy 1-0 win for Will. I suppose in American football terms, he kind of nicked a late field goal, didn't he, really? When there wasn't any touchdowns in the match. So, but I actually, to be fair to the lads, and not just last week, there's been some really late goals go against our handicappers this season. And on another day, I think certainly both could have certainly had at least one winner each. And I did say, didn't I, that draw no bet security for Will might be crucial. And it proved that way. But I think James can look at his two picks. And I mean, he was winning heading into injury time and ended up losing, let alone pushing. And then the Rennes game was bizarre. I really think 9 times out of 10, they win that comfortably from 2-0 up. So strange things going on. There's been a lot of late goals of late. So it's not over until the fat lady sings, is it? But congratulations to Will nevertheless.
Indeed. Will White is our new champion. Will, it was not pretty, but you got over the line, as Steve was pointing out. 1-0 win, a little bit of Mourinho ball, parking the bus, but you got there. Well done.
Yeah, I've been wondering whether I'm going to go down as the worst champion in Bet Rivers history, actually, which is probably the case. Yeah, it certainly wasn't pretty, but win's a win at the end of the day, and we move on to the next round. I would like to say commiserations to James. I think maybe my mind games worked by getting my picks into the WhatsApp group early. Perhaps it threw him off his game a little bit, intimidated him. But there was an interesting stat that really sums up last weekend, I think. In the top 5 European leagues, there were 9 goals scored by teams playing with 10 men against 11. And both James and I had picks scuppered by this. We've already talked about wrong. Drawing from 2-0 up, and Eintracht Frankfurt as well, equalising in the 92nd minute whilst down to 10 men, pushed my pick on mine's draw no bet. So hopefully we get a little bit more luck this week, and RJ and I can both pick out some winners.
Let's hope so. RJ is the challenger, US-based handicapper, world football expert, a regular, of course, across plenty of our betting weekly shows. RJ, very good day to you. Will just mentioned the tactics there of getting the picks out first. He did it again this week as well. What are your tactics? Have you got any? Have you gone for bigger prices? I note that your last pick is last of the 4 in terms of chronology with a Sunday game. So it potentially could hinge on that. Did you think about anything like that? Or is it just, I'm just going to put my best bets forward?
Well, there is some. First off, Dan and Steve, good to see you. Will, pleasure to be on the show with you. First time with you. So, congratulations on your win last week. And yeah, Dan, in terms of tactics, in terms of the day of the selection, that really wasn't in my cards, so to speak. But looking at prices certainly was. You know, if we're looking at minus 125, minus 130, or if we're confident of taking a little bit of a stab at a plus money price to take more of a risk, I think that's something that I certainly considered and we'll hear about as we go on. But yeah, in these couple pick matchups, you really need to be cognizant of the line choices, because Will could go 2-0, but my prices could be minus 28, minus 130, and it may not be enough. So
it's not easy. And it is a very small sample size. And I know that all bettors would look to big sample sizes before knowing if certain metrics or the way that you're approaching betting is the way to go forward. So let me ask all three of you this. Steve, you know, when you're looking at trends or you're looking at a certain league or a certain team, what is the sample size you're looking at? Is it number of bets and number of games? Is it just a season, or do you not look at it that way?
We're talking in terms of actual betting selection and picks, Dan.
Yeah.
I think
the point I'm making is that, you know, these guys have 2 picks to go head to head. It's not enough to determine who's the best tipster, who's the best handicapper. So for those bettors looking longer term and just a bit of education as well as entertainment on the European show, what would you say? What would you look for?
I think you've got to be looking at least a half century of picks, and then preferably 100 selections, really, I would say. Well, you're right, Dan. This is different to last season where we had individual shows for each league, where each handicapper was having at least 3 picks a week each. And at times they could sort of push the boat out a little bit with some big selections and things. It's completely different now. It's 2 picks versus 2. You know, there's leans as well at the end. I must say the leans of the boys last week was excellent. Again. So yeah, you know, you got to watch that whole show, you know, the whole package. But I would imagine most weeks, both handicappers are just basically trying to produce their 2 best bets for the week. And over the course of the season, you know, I don't know how many that will add up to for them. Someone like myself is going to be judged more on scrutiny on that because I'm going to have more selections. But yeah, I think you've got to be looking at least 50, probably more, really.
Will, what do you think when it comes to sort of back testing and that sort of thing? Are we looking at 50, 100, 1,000 before you're confident? I guess it depends on how you bet. If you're just betting on systems, I would imagine you need a lot. If you're betting more subjectively, it's different. Do you take anything like this into consideration?
I mean, I'd probably say that I'd let the statisticians argue over relevant sample sizes. But one thing I would say is I like to use kind of, I guess, a shortcut to kind of manufacture a shorter term metric as to, you know, whether I have an edge in the markets. And that's measuring the prices I take versus the closing line. And there is a term for that, closing line value. And if you're betting prices that close shorter, so if you're betting a -110 shot that closes -125, or you're betting a -1/4 goal that closes -1/2 goal on the main line, that's quite a good sign that you're onto a good thing long-term wise. Now, obviously, variance is going to play into that. You're going to have some winners, some losers, and luck's going to play a big factor. But I like to use closing line value to kind of assure myself that I'm doing things properly and correctly.
Big thing, closing line value, certainly for stateside players, RJ. I mean, when you look at sort of sample sizes and so on, is it, you know, if you're looking at certain leagues, you want to get 50 bets, 100 bets. If you're looking at a certain team, have you got any sort of theories on this?
Yeah, closing volume value is big. I typically like Will's strategy, and honestly, I normally don't wager on leagues until at least I get around 6 to 8 games under their belt. I like to see at least 3 in their respective home and away spots. I personally put a lot of weight and leverage into that versus just overall form. It seems to have, well, it's worked out for me well historically. But yeah, I like to see at least 3 matches, you know, in their respective home and away spots before I tip a match. You know, and then we're at the point early in the big league in the season where, you know, CLV comes into play, as Will said. You're looking at the first 2 to 3 matches. You're making an educated guess, right? You're making, you know, with the information that you have, specifically like me, somebody who relies on data quite a bit. It's a challenge, but I think early enough in the season you can get a good read on teams and get a good expectation of what kind of performances they'll be able to put in and week out, regardless of who they play.
Let's kick off the challenge. Rules are simple. 2 picks from our challenges, as we've just been discussing. Whoever makes the most profit with their pick stays on for next week for the head-to-head battle, although it's in a fortnight time because we've got an international break next week. If the profit or the loss is the same, then Nigel Seeley, the man in charge, will decide who got the bad beat and declare the winner. Will, as the defending champion, is going to kick off the challenge this week. We go back to Rennes, who are travelling to Brest. This is 11 a.m. Eastern on Saturday. Rennes plus 105, just a shade bigger than even money here. They are still unbeaten, Will, But they badly let all of us down last week after going not just 2-0 up, but a man up as well before being pegged back by Le Havre. Talk us through the play here for your first pick.
Yeah, I think this is a match and perhaps a bet after James's own heart. So this is for James. This one.
You're really turning the knife in there, aren't you?
I'm sure he won't take it that way, but I think the first thing I have to say about this match is it is a local derby, and funny things can happen in derbies. They can be tighter than you'd otherwise expect. However, I just can't take my eyes off this over 2.5 line here, and I can't help but think that it should be over 2 3/4, maybe even 3. If it weren't a derby, I think this would probably be trading an over under 3 line. The overall attacking numbers for both teams are just very strong through 3 matches so far this season. Rennes somehow didn't beat Le Havre, that we've spoken about till we're blue in the face, despite generating 2.82 xG. They also had decent offensive outputs versus Lens in the previous round, and won very convincingly at home to Metz in the opening match day. We have previously talked about Rennes' offensive weapons on the show. I know Steve's big into that with Jouiri, Kalimuendo, Ludovic Blas, and even off the bench with Ibrahim Salah and Desiree Doué. They've got a lot of weapons that can really pose a threat to the opposition through the full 90 minutes plus. Moving on to Brest, they were unlucky to not score away to Marseille, I thought. They generated 1.76 xG, and in game week 1, they generated a whopping 2.55 xG at home to a strong Lens side. So I think both teams are very attacking and have higher offensive outputs here. At the same time, I think Brest's offensive numbers have been suspect, conceding an average of 1.6 xG per game. And at the same time, for me, this Rennes defense just doesn't convince. The most experienced defender in the squad is 23-year-old Arthur Turda. And in addition to that, I've been reading that Salzburg are interested in Christopher Wu. He's not necessarily a starter, but there could be some unsettlement in that Rennes defense. Last season, this fixture finished 2-1 to Rennes, and there was a total of 3.44 xG generated between both teams, which is obviously considerably higher than the 2.5 line where the line's been set. The line that day, the goal line, was over 2.75, minus 125 actually on the over. So more than a quarter goal difference to the line we're looking at for this bet. Although it was the final day of the season, and often goal lines are set higher on the final game of the season. In conclusion, I think the line's out by at least a quarter goal. It should be over under 2 3/4 minimum, really. And in this game, in the top European leagues, a quarter of a goal is a big margin to have in your favour. So I'm very happy to bet Brest Rennes over 2.5 goals at minus 115.
Has been a profitable strategy, Steve, previously with Rennes. Your thoughts on this one?
It's funny. I was just it's reminded me of a bet I placed in pre-season on a friendly. I very rarely bet on friendlies, but these two met in the end of July. I was on over 2.75 goals, and I thought I had a massive edge because I knew it was going to be 4 times 30-minute periods. But it ended only 1-0 in 120 minutes, which really frustrated me. You're right. This is, I think the goal line is this because of the derby nature of the match. There's a lot of teams in Brittany. They're all raging for supremacy. Rennes generally have a good record against Brest. I think they get themselves up for this game. And Will called it there himself. I think the key to the game is the Brest defence. Because under this manager, since he took over in January, you can get, the solid version of the Brest defence where they just don't look like conceding a goal, or you can get, and more recently it has been, sadly, this version for them, they've dropped down a level to where they just concede too many chances and too many goals. So I think it is more likely to go over than under, to be honest, considering how both teams are playing right now. There's an interesting, if you're looking for a bit of value for a goal scorer, Romain Del Castillo has been in good form for Brest. 3 goals in his first 2, and he's going to be on penalty duties. Rennes can fall asleep and make silly mistakes, as we saw last week. So he could be worth looking at. So overall, I think there is a decent advocate for goals here.
Sticking with Ligue Monaco, Lens a little bit later, 3 p.m. Saturday Eastern. This is RJ's first selection. Monaco, top of the table, going well. RJ, talk us through your pick.
Yeah, first off, I do like Will's pick. To be fair, it was something I had pegged it as well. So I think that's a nice shout. But yeah, looking at Monaco versus Lens over 3 at plus 106. Monaco, as you stated, off to a strong start, 15 goals in their first 3 matches combined. They fell behind Nantes. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. You guys help me out sometimes.
I just think you should just go for it, RJ. Don't worry about it.
Nantes 3-1 last time out, and they clawed back to a 3-3 draw with goals from Ben Yedder and Mina Mino, both the top scorers in league on after 3 matches. So there is no doubt they have the weapons to net 3 themselves, but I think they will. But I question the reason why I think this has strong potential. That's why I went with over 3 at plus money versus over 2.75 is because of goaltender Philippe Kohn. He looked decent in the first 3 matches, and to be fair, all of 3 goals against Nantes last week was, they had beauties, right? A penalty, a nice header, and a beautiful sort of lay-in in the bottom corner that he really didn't have a chance at. And I think he looked decent in the first 3 matches, but he's made the jump from Austria First Division to the Swiss Challenge League to from Salzburg and to Ligue 1 in just a matter of 4 years. I think he's 23 years old. He's young, and he's probably going to have a promising career, potentially playing for, the Swiss national team someday. But I think it to some extent, he could be a liability for Monaco. Lens have found the net in their first 3 matches to start the season against Brest, Rennes, and PSG. They have not won a match, and I think because of that fact, it sets up for a nice match in terms of goals because they're desperate for points, and when desperate teams, they tend to play with a more aggressive, open style, right? So they did lose star striker Luis Openda to RB Leipzig, Seko Fofana to Al Nassr. They brought in Eli Wahi, who netted 19 from Montpellier last season, and Andy Doff from FC Basel in the Swiss Super League. But I think Lens is arguably a little bit worse than they were last season. As I stated, Monaco will be hungry and motivated after their strong comeback last week to get a draw, to scrape a point out. And over 3 plus money. I like this because I think we'll see 4+ goals here.
So goals on the agenda. Adi Hutter's teams throughout his career, Steve, generally produce goals. What's your thoughts on this one? Monaco started the season well. We're looking for goals against Lens.
Yeah, I actually backed this bet early in the week, so I absolutely obviously have to approve with this one. Minamino has been in great form.
Been brilliant, hasn't he?
Yeah, I don't get it. I'll be honest. I think we're probably all kind of fallen into the same trap that he was useless over here in the UK. But you kind of forget moving to a different country, then he can rebound. Him and Ben Yedder have actually been playing really well. Ben Yedder, I can't believe he's allowed to play, but he is, and he's scoring goals. And, this Monaco team just seemed really wild. Lens are an interesting case, yet to win. They've had a tough fixture list. We said in the outright show, we think they are going to drop down this year, and the Champions League hasn't even started. So they're under a little bit of pressure, but I think this match does suit them. I actually think Lens might win. I think the counter-attack nature of them, they won this one 4-1 last year. It's a good matchup for them. They beat Monaco twice. And I could see Monaco scuppering maybe a few chances and Lens just being clinical on the counter-attack. So there should be goals at both ends, which certainly does help the over-under nature. Just one other thing to add about this game. For those who bet on fouls, referee in charge, Willy Delarode, is known for whistling tons of fouls. So get on the overs for those if you can get that market.
Hey, watch out for the cards there. Lens is certainly plus 225 to win the game, but not Steve's hot dog of the weekend. We go to Germany for that, Steve. It's always going to be a tough gig, this one for you. You kicked off with a winner for us, but have struck unlucky since then. And I note that you've just toned it down a little bit price-wise. Talk us through your hot dog this week.
Yeah, I mean, the dog last week was an embarrassment. It was so bad that if it was a dog going into a vet's, it would have got put down, wouldn't it? Rav Vallecano were shocking, but it's the same as losing 1-0 in terms of a result. But you're right. I have toned it down a bit. I think I've been looking at more sort of like a Great Dane, really, in terms of picks, and now I'm just kind of going back to a bog standard sort of Labrador here. Going to Germany. Hoffenheim against Wolfsburg. Wolfsburg was one of my picks last week, one of my main picks on the handicap, and I'm sticking with them here, but this time on the money line, plus 163 to beat Hoffenheim away. Very slight underdog here, but I actually think they maybe should be the slight favourite. I think they've started the season really well. They've dominated both their fixtures. I don't think they've necessarily beaten much in Heidenheim and Cologne, but you've still got to beat what's in front of you. Jonas Wind is in great form, netted loads of goals for them so far. So they've got a player in really great form, which I like. And Hoffenheim are one of them teams. This match is a good chance of going overs as well, by the way. I think anyone looking at the goal line, it's 3 or 3.25. This should go over. Goals at both ends. Hoffenheim are very, very, very wide open. I've just a couple of stats here to note. They've conceded 36 shots in 2 games with 17 on target against them. And they've been facing the likes of Heidenheim last week. They beat them, but they were 2-0 down early. And they can't afford to do that against Wolfsburg. Their defense just massively concerns me. I think Wolfsburg have got the better defense. I said last week, they've got a good away record last season. They generally keep things tighter on the road. And I think this is a really good underdog away from home at plus 163, which is still a pretty good, juicy price, really, when you think about it. A reliable team who've served me well recently against a more inconsistent outfit who will probably miss a few chances and certainly give up a lot of shots. So, the Bundesliga, it's treated me pretty well so far this season. So Wolfsburg on the nose here, plus 163. If you want to play it safer, go draw no bet. I don't think they'll lose the game.
No such thing as a safe bet when it comes to the hot dog. You've got to play Steve's pick. Will's second pick next up. This is Real Madrid Getafe. When we were talking on Monday for the Champions League show, Will, you explained that sometimes a good bet is one that makes you feel a little uncomfortable. And if I was playing this one, that's exactly what I would feel. Talk us through your selection here.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a slightly uncomfortable feeling about this bet. But in other respects, it kind of has to be an automatic consideration with Getafe. They're just so defensive. And if I remember rightly, in match day 1, I think Rory was on the Getafe Real Madrid, the Getafe Barcelona, Barca to win and under 3.5 goals. And he got unlucky that Barca didn't win that game. A fair result probably would have been 1-0 Barca, 2-0 Barca. But I think the difference in this one is I think Madrid do get the win. And they are considerable favourites to get the win, but I think there will likely be less than 4 goals. The big news coming out of Madrid is that Vinicius Jr. will be out for this game. In fact, he'll be out for around 6 weeks. And Vinicius, alongside Bellingham, who has also been discussed previously on this show, those two definitely have the highest offensive output for Real Madrid. Vinicius' track record goes back to prior seasons. Obviously, Bellingham, new arrival. I think, I think on paper, it looks like Real Madrid's start to the season has been impressive with 3 away wins from 3, but the underlying numbers don't really suggest that impressive of performances. Their average XG supremacy has only been just under half a goal a game. And normally goals of games of this kind of teams of this kind of stature, Real Madrid, Barcelona, and the other big European teams, you'd be expecting them to generate an XG supremacy of above a goal a game. So I think their results on paper have been slightly deceiving. Maybe that's down to the adapting to Ancelotti's new system, where they've kind of made Bellingham the centerpiece in that hybrid kind of false 9-10 role at the tip of the diamond in midfield. So I think Getafe will come to the Bernabeu and look to park the bus. Traditionally, they're a very, very defensive team. They don't like to open up much, and generally the goal lines in their games are very low, often under 2. In fact, I believe last weekend, I think the goal line the main line was over under 1.5, which is very, very low. They've had a total of 4 goals in their 3 games so far, and on top of all of that, their top scorer from last season, Enes Unal, who scored 14 goals in a quite a poor Getafe team, is still out injured. Hasn't played a game yet this season, and will be out for this game. So, in conclusion, I think Madrid should still win the game. They've definitely got enough to win it. I think more than 3 goals is unlikely, and I can see something like 2-0 Real Madrid. I don't really see Getafe troubling the score sheet too much.
Steve, you highlighted that Rory Bet said that my biggest fear is Barcelona not winning. You were absolutely right. What's your thoughts on this play?
Well, whenever I see the word under in a bet, I immediately... I'm not a big fan, as you know, with my betting style, Dan, but having looked at this, it's pretty hard to pick a hole in Will's bet, really. There's a ridiculous head-to-head. The last 10 have been both teams to score no. It's not gone over 3.5 this fixture since 2018. Now, I do believe Getafe, this is actually a derby game, isn't it? Getafe are based in and around the Madrid region, so they'll be bang up for it. Last year Real Madrid only beat them twice, 1-0, and I think it's going to be very similar to that Barcelona game. The difference here is, I really would be surprised if Real Madrid don't find a way to win. It might take a while, but they've got a lot of different. I think they've got more different types of weapons than Barcelona, and they will mix up their play if need be. This is going to be I think there'll be a lot of cards in this game. I was looking at the card line, and over 3.5 Getafe cards at plus 128. I think you could do a lot worse than that. They're going to be time wasting. They're going to be getting stuck in everything. So it does look like 2-0 or 3-0 possibly could be the most likely scores. Real Madrid don't tend to rack up the score, do they, that much these days? So it does look a pretty damn good bet, really, a good combo bet, I must say. It's not going to be a pretty watch. Getafe are pretty ugly, and it should really be 1-0, 2-0, or 3-0.
We will find out, of course, over the course of this weekend. Final pick from RJ. We go to Germany for Union Berlin against Leipzig here. RJ, talk us through your selection. A lot of positivity around the capital club at the moment, the top of the league. Of course, we've got the Champions League to look forward to as well. Talk us through the play.
Yeah, looking at over 2.5 goals at minus 108 in this matchup. It's a spicy matchup. Both sides are very active in front of the net to start the season. Union led by Kevin Behrens, who not long ago was in the lower German division and played for Sandhausen in Bundesliga 2, and now he's on to Union Berlin. He scored a hat trick against Mainz, and last time out in the strong win against newly promoted Darmstadt. Obviously, they have Gosens from Inter Milan, young American Brandon Aronson as well. They have not kept a clean sheet yet, allowing a goal against Darmstadt, although they received a red card early in that match and still found a way to net 4 goals after that, which was pretty impressive. Mainz also had missed 2 PKs against them, so they were lucky, to be fair, not to concede more than 2 goals so far in the early stages of the season. As you all know, or if you don't, Leipzig were my top 3 pick outside of Bayern in the futures show. And although they do have, a tough schedule to start the season, I expect them to attack Union and know that they're going to have to break that defense. And they certainly have the firepower to do so, in my opinion. They've scored 7 goals in their first 2 matches this season. Obviously, they took down Bayern in the cup match prior to that, and they won on the road last week 5-1 against they won last week 5-1 against Stuttgart at home. All 5 goals came in the second half, and they even had 2 goals disallowed. So looking at this price, I get it. I think the bookmakers are, Union Berlin, they play a tight style of containment. I think typically historically, even over last season, they've had pretty low scoring affairs. But the firepower of both these sides coming off a very strong start to the season. There may be some reserves. I think what's going to be crucial for this is have a goal in the first half happen to sort of open this up. I think one of my fears is if this goes in the halftime at 0-0, I think it's going to be a challenge to get over. So I think we need an early goal here. But one of the stronger looking plays, I think personally, this weekend in terms of goals.
Over 2.5 is the pick. Steve, this is not your favourite club, Union Berlin. Have you got anything to add?
Plenty to add about. I mean, I actually thought...
At least it's not an under, Steve, because I can't sleep over unders.
This is one of Will's leans as well, and I thought he was just having a bit of fun with me by adding it, because everyone knows that I'm not the biggest fan of Union Berlin. The reason is because they are a statistical anomaly. I mean, last season, if you look at their XG and XGA, they actually had the lowest expected goals in the whole Bundesliga out of any team. But they overachieved by 16 goals, which is pretty remarkable. They're already at it again this year. They've scored 8 goals and their XG is only 3.75. Now, how they can keep this up, I don't know. Both ends of the field as well, by the way. They seem to regularly get away with it. The goalkeeper seems to have some good games. Kevin Behrens is in good form at the start of this season. They are well coached by Urs Fischer, 3-5-2 system. They're one of them teams that you get them in football where you just almost have to forget about their stats sometimes. And they've got a good head-to-head against Leipzig. Won the last 5 Bundesliga games against them. And I think it's because they love being an underdog. They love hitting teams on the counter-attack. They do have this reputation of being involved in low-scoring games. And yes, they did have the most unders of any team last year in the Bundesliga, but it still was a 17-17 split. So I think that's the reason this goal line's so low, even though Leipzig are involved. And Leipzig are crazy, aren't they? You watch any Red Bull side play and you know the style you're going to get. It's pretty open. And there is a decent advocate for goals at both ends of the fields. I wouldn't be surprised if Union, I'll tell you how this game goes. Union probably win the game. At the end of it, look at the XGs. They've comfortably been outplayed, but they find a way to win. That's how their games go, Dan. And I think there's value. I think RJ's found some value here because the goal line probably should be higher, but based on reputation, it's lower. That's what I would say.
Let's just bring in Will finally on this one, because when we asked for leans, this one was a lean, wasn't it, for you, this bet?
Yeah, absolutely. And the more I think about it, the more I like this play. I think, as Steve said, it's based off Union Berlin's reputation. Perhaps an element of these are 2 teams that are likely to be challenging at the top of the table. So markets tend to somehow visualize those games to be tighter than they otherwise would be. But all of the recent stats from this season, and I think stylistically, given the transfers that have come into Union and Berlin in the off season, I think they perhaps realised that to get to the next level, they have to be a bit more attacking. And the weapons they've brought in, especially with Gersons, a very attacking wing back, I think they might be slightly more open this season. And for me, this line should be at least 2.75. And I'm actually now regretting not having it as one of my main picks. I got my leans in before RJ got his picks in. So I'm wondering if there's a potential yellow card there for pick replicating.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, because I said I submitted it, and to be fair, I had a busy day yesterday. I didn't look at the.
Don't give me that. You were looking. We saw.
No, and I submit it, and I say, "Oh, this is one of Will's leans." I'm like, "Here we go." It's going to be a good talking point though tomorrow on the show. So, yeah. And
you got a better price than me as well. I was back in at minus 109.
109. I saw that. Yeah.
That's a great bet.
Okay, picks done. Let's get Steve's best bets of the weekend. 2 selections from our senior handicapper here. 1 in Germany, 1 in France. Steve, what do you like?
Bundesliga on Saturday. Augsburg against Bochum over 2.75 goals. And then Sunday, back into France. Lyon against PSG. PSG -1 Asian handicap. I'll be quick on the German one, because I've talked about Bochum a lot, really, haven't I? This season, how bad they are defensively. I'm ignoring last week's result against Dortmund because I said on the show it's a derby game. Weird things can happen in those matches. They played a 5-4-1 formation. They were always going to be a lot tighter. in that clash. And I also don't think Dortmund are playing particularly good football right now, by the way. I think they're really struggling to get used to without Jude Bellingham. I think both teams will fancy their chances in this game. Augsburg, I said in the pre-season show, I was between them and Bochum, who's back to go down. First match of the season, a 4-4 draw against Mönchengladbach, and they actually put up a half-decent fight against Bayern last week, I thought. They've got goals in them, but they'll concede goals as well. I mean, this could go either way. I wouldn't trust either side at all. But I do like the goal. I'm surprised this goal line's at 2.75. I really am. No hesitation in pulling the trigger here. I think both will absolutely have a go. You could also look at both teams to score an over. And if you do like the Augsburg win, you could do the same again. Augsburg win, but both teams score. And anyway, into France. And this is a bit of, I feel like this is almost a bit of a tribute to James Easton, because I reckon he would definitely be on this pick. PSG -1 Asian handicap. He is going to be on the reaction show on Sunday with me, and we will talk about this game because it will come up later that evening. And I'm pretty sure he's going to be red hot on PSG. Lyon are an absolute mess. Their defense is a disgrace. If you watch them, first 3 matches, the amount of big chances they're giving up is ridiculous. They drew against Nice away last week, but Nice are starting to already give me vibes of like Graham Potter at Brighton or Graham Potter at Chelsea, where they look nice, but they don't finish chances. So Lyon were fortunate they didn't face a clinical team in that game. But they got not just problems on the field, but off the field as well. They're under the financial watchdog in France, the DNCG. New owner John Textor is in a battle with the former owner Jean-Michel Aulas, who's going to sue him. There was some news this afternoon about 15 million of frozen assets are going to be put into play. There's a terrible vibe around for Lyon at the moment. PSG can take advantage of that. And this could get ugly, actually. If they start defending like they have been this year, I mean, PSG could put 3 or 4 up on them. So I'm happy to take them on this -1 Asian handicap at -124 for the visitors. It's just one of the, I'm not going to overthink this one. I don't think it's tremendous, incredible value necessarily, but I'm just very, very confident about PSG at least winning the game. Even a 1-goal win gets a push, but they should really put quite a few goals up on them here if Lyon keep performing as they have been doing. So, keep an eye out for that reaction show on Sunday. I'll quiz James Easton heavily about this game, but I'd be shocked if Lyon get anything out of it.
Good stuff. Leans, these are the ones that didn't quite make the cut, but as Steve has pointed out already, all of the boys, all of the handicappers over the course of the first 3 weeks of the campaign have been getting a lot of these right. So, Will, we've talked about one of yours because it was in the Bundesliga game. You've also got one in Spain for us. Yeah,
this is a pure model-based lean. I think instinctively I don't like it that much, but the lean is Villarreal -0.25 goal at -112 in La Liga versus Cadiz. They haven't been particularly impressive thus far this season. They lost quite a few key pieces in the off-season and haven't really replaced them. They've also had some injuries with some key pieces. Jeremy Pino, who I believe is actually back for this game, has been out for the beginning of the season. At the same time, Cadiz have been quite impressive, particularly at home, defensively quite stout. But I think overall, Villarreal certainly have the weapons to trouble Cadiz here, especially if Pino's back. He'll probably start from the bench. But in previous seasons, I mean, in fact, last season, this line was as short as -3/4 Villarreal. And yes, things have changed since then, but I don't think as much of half a goal's worth of things have changed in the off season. So yeah, I think really a fair line would be here. Villarreal -0.5, maybe +110-ish. So the -0.25, -112 makes a lot of sense to me. I can see a 2-1 type Villarreal win, and you've got the half stake returned if it's a draw insurance on your side too.
Okay, RJ, you've got a couple for us. One is in England. We're not quite sure if we're allowed it, but if Nigel stops us, then it's snuck in for this week. You got one in England, one in Italy for us. Rattle through your leans.
Yeah, I'll be brief. Looking at Tottenham money line -108. They look solid after losing Harry Kane, who they've kept a clean sheet in the last 2 matches. James Maddison and Dejan Kulusevski from Juventus look to be fitting in quite nicely for this side. Burnley have coincidentally avoided defeat in 3 out of their last 4 head-to-heads at Turf Moor. Tottenham were knocked out of the EFL Cup on Tuesday at Fulham, and an interesting stat here was Spurs have only failed to score in 1 out of their last 15 away matches. So looking at Burnley's just terrible performances so far against, Man City, and I think they've allowed 3 goals in both their home matches so far. It was hard not to like this. It was hard not even to take a glance at the team total over 1.5, I believe around -127 when I looked. But yeah, it's a strong play. And then the other play that I like, the other lean, which honestly, like Will said, I somewhat have regrets here on not making this a formal play, but Lecce versus Salernitana, both teams to score. I really like that at -108 as well. Lecce persevered with 2 late goals against Lazio to open up their season at home for a 2-1 win. I think they had 2 goals past the 85th minute, if I'm not mistaken, and then drew last time out 2-2 against Fiorentina with another comeback. So I just really like both teams to score. Salernitana have had 2 draws to open up this campaign. I think they'll likely feel that they can take advantage of this vulnerable Lecce side, who have, like I stated, fell behind twice early so far this season. Lecce have recently signed Nikola Krstovic, who's a Serbian journeyman. He played for Red Star Belgrade, one of the top sides in Serbia. He ended up finding the back of the net against Fiorentina in his first match with this side last time out, and both teams to score at -108 looks to be one of the stronger plays I found, aside from the 2 that I mentioned officially.
That's Lecce against Salernitana, which is a Monday game, incidentally, at 2:45 Eastern. And Steve, 2 matches to look at, 3 leans, though, here. Rattle through your picks, your leans, I should say, for the weekend.
Yeah, Friday night in France, Nantes against Marseille. I do quite like Marseille, to be honest here. They've got a good record in this fixture. It can be a tough place to visit, but they don't have any problems. Nantes are in a real mess defensively, conceding so many chances and goals. So I think Marseille, just on the money line, is minus money, worth backing. For those who do like a bit of a flutter, over 2.5 Marseille team total goals at +195 now. That could be worth a go. If you watched that game against Monaco last week, Nantes defense was awful. And then in Spain, I think Real Sociedad on a -1 Asian handicap against Granada could be worth backing. They haven't won a game yet, but I think that should come here against a Granada team who I don't think are very good. I think they're going to be in the relegation battle. Look at their metrics. They have been conceding a lot of chances. Got a win last week against Mallorca. This is a much tougher test. Sociedad, I could see winning this like 2-0. I think win to 0 for the home team here on that -1 line, which is, I think it's actually going towards a -1.25 line, which I wouldn't take because a 1-goal win is possible.
Okay, those are the leans from our 3 handicappers. Back to the head-to-head challenge to wrap up then. 2 picks versus 2 picks from Will and RJ. Will, remind us of your 2 official picks for the challenge this week.
My official picks are Brest versus Rennes, over 2.5 goals at -115. And in Spain, Real Madrid to beat Getafe at home, whilst also there being under 3.5 goals in the match.
RJ, your 2 picks?
Yeah, going to France, Monaco versus Lens, over 3 at +106. And to the Bundesliga, Union Berlin versus RB Leipzig, over 2.5 goals at -108.
Steve, have you got your prediction of who's going to win this challenge correct yet?
No, this is where I curse someone, isn't it? This is
naught from 3. Curse. So whoever Steve says is going to win, the other person's going to know. Steve, having analysed all of the selections over the past 45 minutes, who's going to win the Week 4 challenge?
I'm going to give a prediction that none of the picks lose. Right? I've changed my mind on air. I was going to go with RJ. I'm changing it to Will because I've noticed there's an over 3 goals pick in there. That could be a push, and that could be if that's a push, and obviously Will wins both of his, then he prevails. I'm expecting a really strong week from the boys here, so I think there's going to be some great profit on this show for those watching.
Good stuff, Steve, Will, RJ. Thanks for your company. Good luck to all. We will be keeping score throughout. We didn't really put too much on Twitter over the course of the last weekend because the wins weren't flying in, but rest assured, when they are, we will. That is a wrap for Betting Weekly Extra Time European Edition. We are off next week because it's international break. We've got plenty upcoming, though, over the course of the week when it comes to the Betting Weekly studios. After that, the winner of RJ and will face Rory Barlow, the Spanish football journalist, in the challenge. And that is your lot for this week. From all of us, it's goodbye.